Good morning. The first song we'd like to offer this morning for you is an arrangement by David Miller of an ancient Vedic hymn called Twameva Mata. So you'll hear it in both Sanskrit and in English.
Readings are taken from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Ananda. This is week 37. Truth invites, it never commands. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Free will is a basic principle of life. God never coerces. He invites us to live in such a way that we find fulfillment in ourselves. If we refuse to live rightly, Paramhansa Yogananda taught, God simply says, I will wait. We have eternity to live. In that eternity, we live as we choose. In self-created darkness, a darkness as intense and as long-lasting as we choose, or in the infinite light, the true self, which is God. Jesus Christ in the Beatitudes offered a beatific example of God's way of inviting mankind to seek perfection, not by commanding, but by offering his human children the incentive they need to choose the right of their own volition. Blessed are the pure in spirit, are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In each of the Beatitudes, Jesus explains the blessing attendant upon observing it. The divine way, similarly, for each of us, is not to do violence to our own natures. Spirituality must be attained naturally. It can never be attained by force. The Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, even the wise behave in accordance with nature as it is manifested in them. Of what avail then is suppression? The scripture then goes on, however, to explain that this doesn't mean we should surrender to the dictates of our lower nature. Rather, it emphasizes our need to aspire to the heights, but each of us in accordance with his own nature, and not to the imitation of anyone else's, offering ourselves up for purification by divine grace. Desire, whatever form it takes, so the Bhagavad Gita explains, should be resisted, even if only mentally. Attachment and repulsion to sense objects, both of these are universally rooted. No one should accept their influence, for verily they are man's enemies. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day out there if you happen to be a fish. Or in the Northwest, yeah. I still wear my shorts. I mean, it's not 50 below yet, right? So it was interesting. I was having difficulty finding the right drone this morning when I was doing my chant, and the whisper in the back of my head is from something that Swami had said. We were doing a concert, actually, and the guitarist had put the capo had capoed the guitar wrong. So there was no way he was going to get to where he needed to be so that the choir could follow him. And in fact, Swami said, you'll never get there that way. And that's going through my head, you'll never get there that way. But I did find the right drone, and it all turned out well. And in fact, a nice segue into that is that we're never going to get to where we want to go by basically following the wrong map. And the Beatitudes give us an opportunity to maybe find a better map. But I wanted to read to you, Swami had a great sense of humor, and since we just celebrated his discipleship, what was it, the 71st anniversary of his discipleship this Thursday, which was such a beautiful opportunity to feel the blessings of God in this temple. So whenever you hear about us having some sort of ceremony or something like that, if you get a chance, do come. I know that our schedules are very busy, but every time you do come, you're going to say, gee, I'm glad I went to that. So keep it in mind. But getting back to Swami's humor. So he wrote, besides the little booklet that we read from for Sunday service, he also wrote it an expanded version that, as you can see, this is a pretty old one, of the same scripture, but he goes into more depth in it. And in the beginning, that's what we used to read, is the whole thing, which became a little bit too long, so he shortened them. But I just wanted to share with you what he had to say about a few of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. One may ask oneself, is this verse offering consolation for the losers of this world? In modern parlance, certainly to be poor in spirit suggests at best lack of fire. Then he says, submissive attitude towards life as if in perpetual expectation of being misunderstood is associated in many people's minds as being saintly. In fact, however, anecdotes from the lives of the saints are rich with examples of different kinds of submission altogether. Unflinching surrender, yes, but to God's will, and at the same time, fearless opposition to err both in themselves and in those in which they were teaching spiritually. Where is that gentle ramp up the mountainside to perfection that might make the ascent easier for the faint-hearted? Heroic determination is what is required. So he's basically, it's important to realize this is why we need masters in the first place, is to help interpret some of these things that we read so that we understand them a little bit more. In other words, poor in spirit doesn't mean that you're a doormat waiting for somebody to step on. You are opening your heart to God, to the omniscient, omnipresent Lord, Divine Mother. And in that way, that's being poor of spirit. You're getting poor of ego, you might say. They didn't use the term ego then, but that's basically what we're talking about. We've got to get rid of that ego, and yet we don't have many people don't have the skills or the ability, the roadmap to find out just exactly how do I get rid of these behaviors and reactivities that are causing me so much trouble. Well, the second beatitude that Swami talks about is the meek and mild. And he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Meekness, as the word generally used today, seems a very colorless quality. It conjures up images in the mind of people weakly accepting the inevitable, images of timidity, of limp, long-suffering patience, or of simply so childish that approaches simple-mindedness. Do people in any of these categories ever inherit the earth? Quite the contrary. They are rarely found succeeding at anything. How is it possible, then, that these frail reeds will ever inherit the earth, except perhaps some minuscule portion of it from a deceased uncle? He goes on to talk about that meekness can be also related to mildness and eventually to harmonious. And it's there that he goes on to speak about living in harmony in what's going on in your life, in the world. And that's what we are looking at, is how do we live in harmony with the world? Or perhaps one way to look at it is, what would life look like if we didn't follow the Beatitudes? In other words, instead of being harmonious, we're just out for ourselves. Instead of being getting rid of the ego, we were very egocentric. Well, we don't really have to look too far to see people that are already living here in the United States that have a very strong ego. They have a strong sense of what their belief of what is right and wrong. And there are also a lot of people that just want to make a lot of money. I was listening to OPB recently, and The big deal now is vaping. And the fellows that invented it were Stanford design engineers or whatever. I don't know what you call them. Anyway, they just followed the modem that Marlboro brought out in a cigarette back whenever Marlboro started. In fact, Marlboro sued them because they were copying their own advertising. It was that close. And interestingly enough, who are they focusing their energy on? Children. People from 12 to 18 years old. That is their entire advertisement. And I just can't find a moral precept or anything. I can't find anything moral about addicting children to something for me to be able to make money. I mean, the same thing's happening in all the other countries, except they're using cocaine and heroin and everything else. So it's not like we're the only ones. I mean, I guess if you want to put it in a scale of 1 to 10, maybe vaping's not quite as bad as cocaine, heroin, or, I guess, what's that other stuff called? Meth, not meth. Yeah, meth. What's that? Crystal meth. I mean, that's even, Geez, remember before they got rid of the Sudafed, they locked down the Sudafed, you'd find tons of Sudafed wrappers all over the place. People were just out there making money and not having any care to the people's lives that they were ruining in the process. Now, we have to take some responsibility here. And in fact, yoga does give us a roadmap that does show us how we can move forward on the spiritual path. But first of all, those kids, 12 to 18 years old, and it starts younger. It starts with the parents, really. But here we have a fantastic living wisdom school, right over here. It's unfinished. It's a fantastic opportunity for many, many children to become fantastic adults and leaders in our world. Okay? I hope and pray that we find a way to finish that school and open it up and help more and more children to lead us in the future so that things like this, they're always going to happen. But we got to keep the balance, right? How are we going to keep the balance of the light and the darkness if we're not putting the energy into the light part? And the only way that you're going to bring the light into anybody is by offering it. You can't, just like it said in the scriptures today, you just can't force anything on anybody, but you can make it available. And to those people that feel a sense of connection, there isn't really anybody on the planet who doesn't feel a sense of soul connection, at least at some point in their life. But what happens? That changes, doesn't it? It changes because of environment, whether it be our parents, our culture, where we're born, social economics. There's so many things that are involved. It's all karma, of course, but the way the game is set up, we have to, bring that light up as much as we can, just in order to keep the darkness from getting any worse than it already is. Now, there's got to be an awful lot of good people out there, otherwise this place would look like the Dark Ages, right? So there's a lot of good people out there, a lot of people doing good work out there. But there's a lot that we can do to help in that process. And for many of us, when we come onto the spiritual path, we actually have no idea how to connect with spirit at all. But, whatever brought us to yoga has brought us to a roadmap that will help us very much so. Our Raja Yoga program started just this last week, and Surendra gave us a fantastic introduction and a roadmap to how to find happiness, how to find God, and in a very, very simple way. It didn't require a mystical interpretation of the Beatitudes, which I'm glad we have the Beatitudes. I'm glad we've got the Ten Commandments. I'm glad we've got all the noble truths. I'm glad that every religion has its own moral precepts that will bring them to a higher reality. But we have Raja Yoga, and we have the 8-limb path of yoga that give us a very clear picture of what it requires of us to find that happiness and also to be an instrument of that happiness to others. And we want to do this in a way that doesn't suppress who we are. So it's not like you're going to go to hell, unless you follow this, this, and this. It's like, try this. See what it's like. What's it like to be, nonviolent? Okay, so we're not really bashing people over the heads. I mean, nobody here is going to probably do that, I don't think. But don't we bash each other emotionally every now and again? We certainly bash ourselves. We're just, we're not good enough. Oh, God, I wish I'd never said that. Oh, I made myself such a fool of myself. All these things. And, when we get into that mode, we don't really serve anybody. It's actually a pretty egocentric place to be. And yoga teaches you that you don't have to stay there. Okay, you made a mistake. Let's move forward. What can we do to change that? What's the behavior? What's the affirmation? What's the prayer? I mean, we're here because we're in school, so there is a way around it. So we find that way, and we start to use those techniques. Non-stealing, non-lying, non-greed, non-sensuality. Each one of these has a specific way in which we can move forward, and it's not so simple as just, reading. It's not completely obvious by just saying those words, because, how many of us are going to be stealing? I mean, if we had to steal for food or something like that, you can almost understand that. But we're not stealing copyright laws. We're not forging money. We're not, whatever you do to steal things. But we can steal another person's thunder. We can steal their energy. There's different ways in which we can steal in order for us to maybe feel that our ego, that we're above that person or that situation. So, and non-greed doesn't have necessarily about hoarding or just trying to hold on to things. It's, I really think that greed, for the most part, at least when we see it in more of a cultural context, is more about a lack of security than anything else. And where is the most security that you're going to find but in God? That's what it all comes down to, is how do I create a relationship with God that is always there, this intimate relationship with God. And we're taught prayers, and we're taught affirmations, and we meditate. Now, when you meditate, though, are you going a little bit further? As I said, there was these 8 limbs. By the way, the 5 niyamas are contentment, purity of heart. What else do we have here? I've got them all listed here. Discipline, introspection, and devotion. So these are things that we can do to bring us ever closer to God. But if we want to know God, it really requires a mindset. So even if you meditate, if you're meditating and half your meditation is sleeping or dozing into some other subconscious realm, you're really not meditating. It would be better to meditate for shorter periods of time with greater concentration than to meditate for long periods of time and just be nodding off. Okay? In fact, when I first learned how to meditate, I learned TM back in the 70s. I had my big, nice, easy chair, and I get in my easy chair and do my mantra, and this was after work, so boom, I was out. But then I would wake up, I probably took that 20-minute super nap, and then I could meditate. Then I would really meditate again. Okay. So what we're being asked to do when we meditate is to, one, can we sit still for a period of time? Can we interiorize? No. That's why you oftentimes will see people wearing headphones. And one of our techniques, we're actually using a mudra to close off the tragus of the ear. We're trying to turn off the sense phones and tune into what is going on inside of us. And all of this is part of yoga. And then we concentrate on God or one of his aspects, and love or joy or peace. I prayed specifically today for wisdom, power, wisdom, and joy. So if it doesn't come off, blame upstairs. Yeah. I gave it my best shot. All these different aspects we can concentrate on. If you just concentrated on joy or light at the spiritual eye, just concentrate there. There'll come a point where you will start to go into that, and you'll start to become absorbed into that. At first, it's very little, but over time, it becomes more. And the masters eventually reach a point where they go into complete oneness with the divine. That is the roadmap, and you're giving that. You got that the first day of the Raja Yoga class. Okay. Simple techniques, but not simply achieved. We spend lifetimes now working on those. But we do it as a group. We do it as a Sangha. Sangha means spiritual family. We come together and we share these techniques and we practice on each other, don't we? Right? We get a chance to rub those little egos together, and sometimes they're going to get a little friction and stuff, and we can say, well, I can take a deep breath. That's Yoga 101, right? Take a deep breath, let go, and say, wow, that didn't go over so well. Okay? Apologize. Oh my God, being humble. Yeah, I've got to say, the one thing that I notice the most in people in the world is that if a mistake has been made and they are called on it, not in a judgmental, it doesn't even have to be judgmental, it's just like, maybe next time we do something different. 9 times out of 10, they're going to have an excuse of why they did it wrong. That's okay. But at some point, you have to just say, I did it wrong. Doesn't matter why. Maybe I can do it better next time. If we are always looking outside of ourselves for the reason why we're not the way we want to be. We're never going to get there from there. We have to go from the inside. I want to read to you from Whispers from Eternity. This is on page 41. It's number 23. The demand for removing the cork of ignorance. No more shall my consciousness remain bottled in this little vessel of flesh, corked with ignorance. No more will I remain moving through the sea of cosmic consciousness, night and day, years, decades, and how many incarnations, so close, yet never able to contact thy sea. Through the bursting vibration of cosmic sound and the surging of the holy name, I have removed the cork of ignorance, which so long separated me from thee, though we lived together so closely. Now my body consciousness will meet thy all-surrounding, all-pervading consciousness. No longer will I walk heedlessly in thee, but never knowing and feeling thee. Thine image with me shall meet thine image everywhere. By releasing the I-ness in me, I will know that I am thou and that thou alone art the little egos of all of us. The Beatitudes, the Eight-Limb Path, all of these require courage, steadfastness, willpower. These are things that you don't all come in this world with. And in fact, you may lose them along the way. Okay? There are things, though, that within a group of people that are all trying to do the same thing, we can help support each other in. And remember the children. Remember, how can we serve our children? Have a moment of silence.
The interesting thing about this next song is that it has its roots in the first. So the introduction that Vajra will sing is the same melody from the Twameva Mata, with which we opened the ceremony, the service with. So please enjoy this. It's Well Done, Lord by Swami Humor.
In India there lived by the banks of a stream a hermit whose prayers chose applause for their theme. He gazed at the flowers and he smiled at the sun, and he clapped with delight. Lord, he cried, oh, well done. Well done, Lord, oh, very well done. The mountains that love with the gypsy clouds, the fields smile to welcome the sun. All nature sings praises of love. The fields smile to welcome the sun. All nature sings praises of love. The trees dance to show their elation. A day of God's earth has begun.
morning. We have another full week ahead. But first, right after service, our bagel bar has returned in full force from its partial summer hiatus. And we invite you to enjoy some refreshments and satsang with us right after service. And then after about 10 minutes or so, we'll have our healing prayer circle, and everyone is invited to join that, an opportunity to pray for those that we know to be in need of healing energy. This week ahead, we have our second week of drop-in yoga. First, we have drop-in meditation, and that's on Tuesday and Wednesday evenings from 5:30 to 6:30. All are welcome, and we will be more than happy to spend that time with you. And then we do have drop-in yoga. We have it 3 times now, on Wednesday, Thursday, and on Saturday. And you can find out about all of these things by picking up one of our bulletins or visiting us online at our portland.org website and going to the calendar there. On Friday evening, we have our 3-hour meditation, and everyone can come. You don't have to spend the entire 3 hours. You can come in quietly, leave quietly if necessary at any points along the way. And then finally on Saturday, we have 2 big events, and I'm sure there's a way to participate in both of them. First off, right here in our parking lot is going to be a Maha yard sale for fundraising benefiting the school. There is a tremendous amount of goodies to purchase, and they're all, of course, at very good prices. And then also on Saturday, out in Ananda House, they're having a Save-A-Day, another opportunity for refreshments and satsang, and a way to make a difference in other people's lives as well as our own. So please join us along the way.